Welcome to Unlikely Intersections, the podcast where intent, impact, and inquiry inspire our conversations. Fascinating thing about intersections is that we all go through many intersections every day. The way we navigate these determines the trajectory of our days and our lives. I'm Dr. Philip Brown and my good friend Dr. Terry Jackson. We're ready to go today with another great topic, which is return on learning.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic because we're always learning. And you said something very profound before we started the show, at least profound to me. And it was, we basically learn within our biases, right? Whatever it is of interest to us, that's what we go and learn. Very rarely do we step outside and say, hey, I'm a business major, I'm a marketing guy, but I'm gonna go learn something about chemistry, right? I'm gonna learn how to mix these components together. It's rare that we do that. A lot of my reading has been business, of course, and then adding some philosophy to it to try to understand. But that only comes through some type of awakening because somebody exposes you, and so that still falls within a bias.
Yeah, the amazing thing, I think people get it confused, right, is there's that whole concept of being a deep expert, right? Of going deep into one thing. Mm-hmm. That's not what we're talking about. Right. We're talking about also basically how we take our depth of knowledge and add it to someone else's depth of knowledge and then together create something different.
Yep.
And to me, that's the kind of learning I'd love to explore today and talk about because it's way different, right? Like, I've had several different careers personally, and being a surgeon is dramatically different than being a health system executive.
Right.
Now, one kind of potentiated the other in my case, but they don't have to go that way.
That's right.
But by using certain strengths in the one, it helped fill a particular role in the other.
Yep.
But then, ultimately for a leadership team, it becomes a complementary skill set.
Yep, absolutely. And I've been in multiple industries. And so, you learn the details about each industry, but you always come back to, and we've talked about this quite often, you come back to the fundamentals of what it is, right? What connects the dots for everything. But it's still that learning, right? And it's important because we all say we are lifelong learners, right? Even though it might be biased, we have to understand what that return is because too often I hear people say, well, that might be a little bit expensive, or what does that cost? And I have to ask the question, what is the cost of remaining ignorant?
Yeah, that's pretty high. We see it all the time, right? And that's one of the things. I guess I've always really been drawn to read for some reason my whole life. I mean, even as a little kid, as soon as I could read, I was almost always reading something, and it helped me in the short term because it really helped me with English and grammar and context and being able to understand all those things. And I only now I'm realizing none of that stuff ever went away, right? Like there's a little piece of some of all that stuff that I ever read that I carry around with me all the time. Doesn't make me an expert in anything necessarily, right? And it doesn't have to, but it just, there's a certain breadth that I think is really helpful. And now at this phase in my life, I remain an avid reader. Lots of different stuff, not related to healthcare, not related to being a surgeon, but the whole breadth of topics, just because it's fascinating.
Yes, I would agree. And I'll have to say, in undergrad, I can't say I did a lot of reading. What I will say is I felt as though if I attended class and I was able to take copious notes and then use the text as a reference, I could do well just from attending the lecture. So part of my strategy was I'm going to be in the classroom. I'm not going to skip the class and say I can read and I can keep up with the instructor. So I didn't do that. It wasn't really until the PhD process that I really got into reading. And I was like, wow, I've read more books in the PhD process than I ever did in the undergrad or the master's process. And then from that, it enabled me to do a lot of reading, right? I like to be able to connect history with business, right? Because all economic conquest has been about people, minerals, a land. And so I'm always looking at the historical element of business, and then trying to figure out why did this particular thing happen the way that it did, because it's all history, right? It's all history, and so you can't separate one from the other.
What's amazing to me now is, especially with our MG100 group, but other groups as well, we have a lot of folks who are authors who have written books that they obviously recommend those to us,
Yes.
but also who are incredibly well read.
Yes.
And sort of sharing things that have been meaningful to them and their journeys, I've found very helpful in mine. And it's really, it becomes a virtuous circle.
Yes.
Where you add a little piece here and add a little piece here, and pretty soon you've built this beautiful thing.
Yeah, for me, I always think about it as being a kid in a candy store, right? I used to be able to walk in Barnes and Nobles and I see the books and I say, I like to read this and I like to read this, all these business books. Now I'm in a group where these guys are the authors of the book. And so instead of necessarily have to making a purchase, you don't necessarily have to make, they send you a book to your home. Here's my latest book, you read. And with all of the breadth and depth of their knowledge and expertise, it gives us so many different perspectives. And so it keeps us in a process of learning. And as someone once asked me, he said, well, man, why are you doing all of this reading? What are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to share it with others. So for me, it's not about me just learning it and utilizing it, right? It's about sharing knowledge with other people, inspiring others to do something very similar.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it kind of goes to core values and stuff like that. So that whole, curiosity drives me to dig into those things, but service drives me to help spread it to the world.
Mm-hmm. And what I will say also is, because of our friendship, whether we are texting or talking on the phone, you may mention the book, and I was like, man, I need to probably get that and read that myself. So there's an inspiration from you as well with all the reading that you do, because if I'm not mistaken, you correct me if I'm wrong, reading is a part of your relaxation, and so you might read a book a day.
Yeah, I have been reading a book a day, and I usually will have 3 to 5 books going at any time, and like sometimes those planes land boom, boom, boom. So you might finish up 4 or 5 books in a day or 2 days, and it's amazing by doing it that way. Everybody. I mean, we all do things whatever way works for us, right? But for me, it's always worked to have several different things going. Mm-hmm. I don't get them confused in terms of the stories or the themes. But I do see synergy a lot of times, and it's like, it's a way of connecting with the world that's much broader than I could ever do personally, right? Because books take you everywhere.
That's right. For those who haven't traveled, if you read, you will travel, because the books do take you there. And I'm like you, I have 4 or 5 books going at the same time. And I don't get them confused. I'll put one down and pick up another. And all of a sudden, as you said, the synergy, I see how the dots connect. I'm like, wow, I would have never thought about this had I not read this. But now that I'm reading this, I see the whole picture. And for me, that's exciting. And so it's increased my curiosity, right, around learning something different. And we all have to understand that there is always a return on learning, whether that return is short term or long term. Because I've had people say, well, Terry, if I engage with you in this particular program and it costs this, well, I'll get my return on investment. Well, if you engage with me in this particular curriculum, you're going to carry it for the rest of your life. And if you carry it for the rest of your life and you refer to this information or this knowledge, that's a return on the investment that you make. And so people have to understand what that really means when you're learning, because it's not static, it's fluid.
Yeah, and it dwarfs other investments, right? We talk
Yes.
about the power of compound interest. We talk about, what happens if you're investing in the stock market over time? What's that annual rate of return?
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge, and more particularly, the wisdom that you can gain from putting together different pieces of knowledge has a return that dwarfs that, and it helps take us to spaces that we don't always, it doesn't always translate to money necessarily, but it translates to a fuller life.
That's right.
It translates to a sense of abundance. The more you get into all these sources of great knowledge and wisdom, you realize, man, that's a huge, huge thing, right? Like I can just sample pieces of it. And that helps me personally to kind of understand the theory of abundance.
Yes. Because I remember, you hear scarcity a lot, and how we're going to run out of this and we're going to run out of that. And I was curious. I said, so where did that theory come from? I need to understand that theory. And so went back and did a little bit of research. Heard a guy's name, Thomas Malthus, if I'm not mistaken. He was trying to figure out how long it was going to take in the 1800s, how long it was going to take before we ran out of food for human beings. And so there we go with the scarcity, right? And so ever since then, we've been dealing with this whole scarcity piece, and they added into economics, right? And so everything is about when we're going to run out of resources. And then you ask yourself the question, what have we run out of since we've been on this earth? In my 60 years, we haven't run out of anything. Now, we may have polluted the water. We may have cut down forests. However, none of that's disappeared. And the same amount of water is on this earth today that was on this earth when it was created, So abundance is is all the universe knows.
Yeah, as soon as you get to scarcity, you're in the fear, right?
That's
And we've
right.
done episodes on what fear does to you. It's all bad, with a few exceptions, right? Like there are certain times where fear spurs you to action. That's good. There are certain times where fear evokes courage. That's good. But the fear itself, to have purely fear-based thinking, most commonly puts us in a pretty tough space.
I would say so, and I would also say this. It would appear to me the more I learn, the less fear I would have. So if you want to talk about eliminating or reducing fear, that's your return. Because fear is rooted in ignorance, and all ignorance is not knowing. You can remove ignorance through learning. Now, stupidity is a whole whole different kind of topic, right? But with learning, the aim is to remove the ignorance, and of course, ignorance is when you say that, it makes it sound real bad. But all it is I don't know, right? I'm ignorant to the fact of. But once I learn, now I'm no longer ignorant. Now I'm knowledgeable about it, right?
Yeah, well, you're talking about gaining options all along the way, right? And what makes us scared a lot of times is if we feel like we're stuck, right? I can't get out of this, whatever it is, right? I'm stuck. I don't have anything. I got nothing. I'm just stuck. That's one of the core human fears that exist. But the more you know, the more options you have. And some of those options are just, where do I go or to whom do I go to find new options?
That's right.
And so it's just this perpetual broadening that makes us a lot more viable.
And the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. So that it should inspire curiosity for you to learn that what you know that you don't know, right? And in doing that, it should help eliminate the fear. It should provide more options. It's a perpetual process, right? Where there's nothing but, I'm going to say, healthy returns.
Yeah. Fascinating thing is when you sort of think about what you're doing when you go to a source, whether it's a book, whether it's a person, whether it's a group, in a sense, you're really asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And we know how powerful that is. We've talked about it a lot of different times, is that, if we kind of go through life with an idea that we're going to need help,
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to be needed, and that we're going to be changed, it's hard to get too far off, And so when you're going to develop yourself, it doesn't mean that you're not good and complete the way you are.
That's right.
It just means that there can be more. And in that sense, it's really too hard to get in the wrong place on the more versus enough spectrum, right? Like, I like that construct of a spectrum between I want more and I have enough,
Mm-hmm.
because this perpetual quest for more of certain things gets you in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
More knowledge really doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It does allow you to recognize that in any given moment that you're alive, you're enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You are enough in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it's just a matter of choices of, okay, what's next? What's the next move, or what's the next development? What do I need to do?
Someone asked me the other day, they said, walk me through the steps when you were getting ready to leave corporate America. You came here and you're getting ready to make this move. What were the key components? I said knowledge, networking, and confidence. So if I'm leaving this particular profession and I'm moving into something new and different, then that means that I have to increase my knowledge and my skills in the area where I'm going to go. What I also have to be able to do is network, meet new people, learn about new people. So now I'm learning new knowledge, I'm learning about new people, and confidence. We talked about little wins in earlier episodes. Reflecting back on my small wins over my life to help build the confidence. So now that I have this knowledge, I'm networking, and I have this confidence, I can begin to move forward. But all of that fits within the spectrum of learning and the return on learning, because it's the deconstruction of the old model around what I was doing for a living or my profession, creating a new model around the new profession, as we would call it. Well, I guess I wouldn't call it an alternate reality, but it could fit within the alternate reality, because the alternate reality becomes the new reality, right? And so I've deconstructed all that, but I've reconstructed a whole new kind of person, if you will, in new knowledge, new people, and I guess a new level of confidence around what it is I'm now embarking upon. So that was the process that I basically had that conversation with them about.
Well, you get into this thing of deconstruction is really the first step in self-work, right? And we've talked about self-work in other episodes, but that's really what drives learning and personal development anyway, is the work. And, it's just kind of like anything else. When you deconstruct it, you're taking it apart.
Mm-hmm.
And what you find is that the you that was built, 10 years ago or in your childhood has some pieces that don't really serve you very well now, right?
right.
They're outdated.
That's right.
There's much better technology that you can incorporate
That's
into
right.
the new you. Yet if we're not careful, we keep those old analog pieces in the digital world, and and we wonder why we get stuck or we get slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole component, some people call it deconstruction. I've also heard it called unhitching, which I think are really similar concepts. You just got to be able to disengage from a lot of the past factors, not in a way that fails to acknowledge them. They were important, right? But in a way that allows you to move forward differently.
Yes.
That's the key.
Yes. I kind of chuckle. I had a conversation Tuesday with a gentleman. He's 95 years old. I'm reinstating into Masonic Lodge, and so they're doing a background check. And so I received an email, and I just looked at the email, but I didn't realize I had to activate anything. So he calls me and he says, well, Brother Jackson, did you receive the email? I said, yes, sir, brother. I received the email. I said, I thought they were just starting the process. He said, well, no, you need to go do this and do that and do that. And I'm like, okay. He says, I'm 95 years old. I don't know a whole lot about emails. I don't know a lot about this technology. He said, when I do math, I break out my pencil and I break out my paper and I use it all from my head, these calculators and all of this. So I started to think about that as you were talking about the old self, right? And adding the technology to it, right? But I guess at his age, 95 years old, he's seen a lot. And he utilizes some of the new technology, but he always falls back on the fundamentals of how he learned, right? So, and he's, and at 95 years old, he's still spry. He's actually the secretary of the lodge. And I'm like, at 95, so he still has to be sharp, and it keeps him sharp, right? And he said, Brother Jackson, I fell down and broke my wrist not long ago. He said, I couldn't hop up like I was 5 years old anymore. He says, I'm 95. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So he's still in the process of learning at 95 years old. And I may have told this story before. When I was in the PhD process, I met a lady who was earning her PhD, and she was 95 years old. It was about her personal learning. Of course, it wasn't about a career. She had the desire to earn the degree and to continue her learning as a human being. So she was pursuing her PhD at the age of 95 years old.
Yeah, I had a neighbor who took a computer class about that. It's just like, why? But because they want to.
Yes.
Right? Because it offers something to them.
Yes.
Same person. Her husband, same age.
That's right.
Basically. He was trying to fix something, a lawnmower, I think. Actually, yeah, it was definitely a lawnmower, and they couldn't get it apart. And his son, who's a little bit younger, was helping him, but they kind of ran out of time. He's like, Dad, we'll have to take this up another time. Son went and did his thing. He lives out of town, came back the next week, and the thing was already done. He was like, what happened? And the dad, in his 90s, said, well, I got on Google, and I figured out how to do it and take it apart.
That's right.
And did it.
You're talking about going on Google, learning new information so he could fix it. And that return on that learning was, one, his ability to go ahead and fix it. But it was about self-gratification. I was able to get it done. The 95-year-old lady with the PhD, I was able to get it done. So my return is how I feel about myself. I feel good about myself because I achieved my goals. It wasn't a monetary, it was an emotional return. And so, as you mentioned earlier, all our returns are not going to be monetary, but there's always a return on learning.
To me, one of the very, just powerful things in what you just said is by doing that, by embracing the growth, it's moving you toward sort of the big three, I like to call them, which is I have nothing left to prove. I have a lot left to learn. I have plenty to offer. And when you can get yourself into that space, which is it's really an authentic space to be in, it gives you a certain amount of peace to start with, and it also gives you humility. And when you put that together with a thirst, with a curiosity to learn, it's limitless.
I would agree with you 100%. We're both doing this thing called CPM, right? Creativity and Personal Mastery, Dr. Rao. And part of that exercise, and you talked about it several weeks ago as you were doing your alternate reality, right? So we got to the point where I'm doing mine and I'm, spewing out what it means to walk this earth and navigate this life as an African-American male. And I had some aha moments. And then as we begin to write our alternate reality of something you can walk into and live into. A learning moment I had was when one of my peers within the small group rewrote an alternate reality for me. And what he wrote for me was, I am broadcasting my voice and my critically important message. I use my platform and influence to help decouple the privilege associated with skin color. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. Learning moment, for me. And the powerful piece, which kind of makes it less threatening, is to decouple the privilege. And so, when you're into alternate reality, it's about finding the evidence to make sure that that alternate reality is real, and you can walk into it and you can live into it. And so I'm seeing evidence on a day-to-day basis as a result of that. But that was another learning moment, right? In my growth and self-development, and how do I continue to navigate this world as an African-American male, and which is very interesting.
And here we go with that concept of decoupling or unhitching or deconstruction. Right? It's kind of all it's all related, right? Like, how do we? In a way, it's a sense of, let's start fresh, but with all that we had before, right? So it's not start from zero.
Right, that's right.
It's how do we use all these ingredients and plus some more to make something fundamentally different and better.
That's right.
And you can't get there without deconstructing it or decoupling it.
That's right.
Very powerful.
Yeah, I found it to be powerful, and I'm seeing the evidence every day. And so again, it's new learning. For me, as I wake up every day, I ask myself the question, what can I learn new today, right? And what did I see yesterday that I'm going to see today, but be able to see it differently? With like, as if I have new eyes, right? That's a key to learning. Let's think about some of the business concepts like Uber. For years and years, people will, they would call a taxi and catch a taxi somewhere, and then all of a sudden Uber popped up, and they looked at the same issue as a new opportunity and said, well, we're just going to have these guys as private contractors, and they're going to have their own cars, and we're just going to handle all of the logistics pieces, right? And with that whole new sense of technology, and basically, they were running the taxis out of business because of Uber, right? And then you get to work when you want to work, and it doesn't matter if you have another job as long as you got the time and you want to do it, right? They saw an industry and put new eyes on it. They saw it differently, and that's what we're talking about. That's learning. That's true learning.
Yeah, the whole concept of beginner's mind, and how do we keep that at the forefront? And I think we probably all have somewhat different formulas for that. For me personally, learning new things just cements it in my brain that there's a lot left to learn, and it makes it easier to have a beginner's mind. But it's hard still, even even then, and still to kind of be curious enough to, it's like looking at something from all these different angles, like your Einstein or Da Vinci or Feynman or one of the greats,
That's
right?
right.
That
That's right.
really just had a way of looking at so many different perspectives that at the end the solution would just be there.
Exactly. That goes back, and I want to say it was Feynman that they wrote about in the book that I had mentioned before, Cracking Creativity. It was Feynman that said, the question, in what ways can we address this issue as it is been presented to us? And so when you see ways, then that means you're talking about a number of options that you can lay on the table around handling that particular issue. all of the alternatives, right? And then you find the best solution that is suited for that particular situation. But the ways get you to thinking around what could possibly be the right solution.
Yeah, I got a funny example of actually doing that this week. And I was reading the same book. And what I was doing in this particular day, my wife and I were working on restoring this trailer we have that I carried, moved my tractor around with. And we had to redo all the lights because, I mean, it's 20 years old, it's, you know. And so we basically redid all the wiring. It was perfect. You know, we looked at that thing. And there was this one light, the left side tail light would not work, the blinker wouldn't work, and we changed out every component in the system, and it's really simple, right? It's basically like one wire to the light, basically, and you know, and that's about it, and then one to the turn light, so two, and we knew they were brand new. And like, God, this is crazy, and you know, tried all these things, you know, spent time. And didn't get it. I'm like, man, everything is in, kept looking at it the same way, right? This is all like it should be. And then I thought, well, if I was that light, what would I need to work as an electric circuit, right? And I'm like, well, electricity's got to come in. And I'm like, how does that thing ground itself, right? Because you got to have that ground. And I was like, these other lights, this light has its own ground. This one, wait a minute, this one is the same as that one, but this one is working and this one is not. And I realized that for that particular light, there are two bolts in the back of it that hold it in place that also serve as the ground. And so I pulled that thing off, and underneath the bolts was just a bunch of rust and stuff in the hole. And so it wasn't getting a good ground, right? So I just sanded off that rust, got it down to pure metal, popped it back on, perfect.
Yep.
You know,
That's right.
but it was because of looking at it differently, looking at it from the perspective of, if I'm that light, what do I need to have in order to work? That's what really opened up something that's really simple, right? Like, and I laughed at myself for a good 2 or 3 hours afterwards, you know, all night long. I just pop up and kind of laugh at myself, and I'm like, man, that was so simple. That's just looking differently.
Yeah, that's it. Looking differently, and that's a skill that we have to develop, because we're all kind of conditioned, if you will, in the same educational process, right? And that skill has to be developed. And oftentimes we'll kind of look at others differently when they look at things differently, right? When you're coming up, I call myself a nonconformist because I'm always trying to look at things a little bit different. And it has a lot of value to it. But we live in a country where conformity is the norm. But they want you to. They say they want you to be creative and innovative, but they want you to conform at the same time, right? That's difficult to do.
Yeah, within bounds, right? We want you to be creative within bounds.
That's right.
And it's interesting because, you know, something happens at some point, because kids are the ultimate nonconformists, and they're also the ultimate creators. And, you know, probably we as parents beat it out of them because they keep asking these questions, and finally it gets to a point of we can't answer the question anymore. So it just ends up being, you know, because that's the way it is.
Yeah, because I said so.
And, and that really, you know, like, and so it's inside of all of us, right? Just like happiness. If you scrape away all the junk, that's where you'll be, right? Same thing. Curiosity and this intense drive to learn is inside of all of us if we'll just let it out. And evidence of that is in children, how just, you know, relentless they are with questioning. And they're looking at it from, you know, you explain something to them in perfect terms from one angle, their next question is really just a different angle of that, something, you know, and so you just kind of get worn out with it.
That's right.
But like that's the that's the healthy brain at work. That's the highest potential brain at work that we can all learn from.
That's right. And one of the keys to that, and I know you're going to agree with this because we've talked about it before, is creating that environment so that that can happen, right? You know, creating the environment where one can be curious, creating the environment where one can learn, right? Where it's okay not to conform, right? It's okay to really think, because oftentimes people want us to regurgitate something that we learned somewhere versus really go out and search and be curious and really think. And of course, one of my favorites is acting your way to thinking, right? We have to encourage that more. And what you get out of this, what this return on all this learning is growth, right? You learn to become uncomfortable learning something new. And that's what life is really about. It's about being able to conquer those moments of uncomfortability because you know you're learning something different and new, and it's about personal growth.
Yeah, the evidence of it is just think about what you got to do if you want to get in great shape.
That's right.
You're going to have to be uncomfortable part of the time.
That's right.
During the workout, after the workout, whatever it is, and there could be limits to how uncomfortable you want to be, and that's going to also limit where you end up to a certain extent. To me, the whole thing is really, it's a fascinating process. This CPM that we're doing right now, in a lot of ways, is really a stripping. We're having to prove to ourselves that something that would have been intuitive when we were 5 or 6 years old is true now.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Is that, yes, they're different. You can have this potential, right? It's something that most parents tell their kids, right? You can be anything. Right? Well, we can too now, yet we're having to prove it to ourselves by collecting evidence, right?
That's right.
Because there's all these layers of junk that are just kind of holding us in, which we need to figure out how to remove.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that we are where we are in our life, but yet we're going through this process right now, right? With creativity and personal mastery and deconstructing all our mental models, right? And reconstructing new mental models just to see how we continue to, and yet continuing to move forward at the same time, which makes it a little uncomfortable because you're really out on the edge of the unknown, right? And human beings, for the most part, don't change because they fear the unknown. But CPM says continue to walk into the unknown, right? And trust, I'm going to say, the unseen forces, and that comes out of that whole U square and quantum leap strategy, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think the whole construct of what we often call unconscious bias is tightly linked to this phenomenon that we're intentionally creating, but we're using it differently, right? We're using it to prove that different is possible.
Yes.
That another reality can be just as viable as the one we're in, because what we're in is built on a construct, and all we got to do is try another construct, and we will use the brain in a way that sees what we're looking for.
That's right. That's right. That seeing is believing, right? Believing is seeing. And this construct of creating a new alternate reality and looking for the evidence and living into it. I remember Dr. Rouse said, you can't change what happened in the past, but what you can change is the story about what happened to you in the past. And that enables you to see it from a whole different perspective. And so, as you talked earlier, when people get stuck, how can you change the narrative around what happened or what is happening so that can become unstuck, right? And regaining, I guess, that child's curiosity, right? That child's energy. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't want to put that kind of effort into their own life.
Yeah, it makes me think, it would be a whole episode in and of itself, right? Is that there are some powerful tools of how to navigate equity, inclusion, and justice that are embedded in what you just said, right? Because while all those things that happen are very real, there also are some other realities that can be explored within there, which could take folks to a better place right now. But that's a painful process and one that is hard to embark on.
That's right. That's
Sounds
right.
like you're kind of on it though, because your new
Yeah.
your alternative reality is
it's powerful. It's been and the interesting thing about it is, not only did I mention it to you, but I've mentioned it to several other people, right, around what this whole alternate reality. And the more I think about it, and the more I think about it, and the more I look, the more evidence I see, right. And so, I've kind of played into it. This past weekend, I gave a presentation at the library. There are other presentations that have come up, and it's interesting because someone asked me to do a presentation at North Carolina Central University. I think it's on March the 30th, right? And I was like, wow, okay, so the evidence is filtering in. I guess you would call it the universe or the unseen forces that are now attracting this to me, and that attraction is the evidence of the new alternate reality. It's becoming the real reality.
yeah, and it's giving you that chance to share whatever you come up with as new reality and share the possibility that everybody can have it.
And at the end of the day, this is change and this is transformation. So to tell me that change or transformation doesn't work, you can't tell me that because I'm experiencing it myself. It is a lived experience that you have to put in the work. If you don't put in the work, it will not happen.
It's that whole concept as life as a practice, right?
That's right.
Like, and we practice and we practice and we practice, and whatever we practice is going to be made permanent.
That's right.
Right?
That's
like,
right. That's
like
right.
not necessarily perfect, because if you're doing it wrong, or if you're doing it in a way, 5 years ago that now is totally unsuitable to now, unless you change that practice, you're going to be misfit.
That's right. And changing that practice is really the deconstruction of a mental model around what that is, right? And then reconstructing to be more relevant and viable in what you're doing because it's 5 years removed from what you were doing.
Yeah, for me, it's always that whole learning piece. Like, as soon as I can get myself to that learning piece, I know I'm going to be okay. Where getting stuck happens is when you're trying to use that misfit model.
Right.
And so you wonder why you keep bumping up into an obstacle all the time, right? It's because the model you're using doesn't work. So if you can increase the rate at which you recognize that you're in a misaligned situation, a misfit model, then you can put yourself into the learning space, and the sky's the limit again.
That's right.
You can
That's
move.
right. And that's that whole thing called awareness, and Dr. Rao talks about that. The only thing in life he talks about, the only thing we have is awareness. If we are aware of it, then we can move into the learning space quickly. If you're not aware of it, you get stuck. And I've been saying this lately. Clarity is a lagging indicator, because people say, well, I need clarity behind that. Well, that only occurs at the end of something happening. That's outcome oriented, right? What you're really seeking is the awareness, and as you become more aware about whatever it is, it allows you to continue to move more fluidly to get to that learning space, so you can learn about what it is or what it isn't, and you can solve whatever it is that you're looking for. But if you're just seeking clarity, man, it may not ever happen.
Yeah, you won't get it on the front end because you can only put it together afterwards.
That's right.
And even that itself is a model, right?
Yes.
Because you're going to discard evidence, you're going to put evidence in, figure out what balance you want to have and say, okay, this is how it actually happened. Not so much, right? It's just kind of a way that you're able to look at it that gives you something to hang on to for the next time.
Right.
And to the extent that it continues to work, hey, go with it.
That's
Why
right.
not?
That's
right?
right.
But
That's right.
when you start struggling again, you got to realize that, hey, I put this mess together in a certain way that took factors out of it that maybe they're important now, whereas they weren't important then.
That's right. And guess what? This model that I used before may not work because I'm seeking clarity, right? When I should be just aware of what's actually happening. It's like when he talks about the mental chatter piece, right? And all of this fits into the whole return on learning, right? You know, the mental chatter will make up your reality, but you got to understand your mental chatter is not you. And so you got to be able to observe it and understand it, right? And it's all mental chatter. I'm having mental chatter as I listen to you.
Yeah.
And you're having mental chatter as you listen to me, right?
Right,
Sometimes
absolutely.
we go off elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the whole audience can tell.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
It's like, that's so true, because you know we are creating our reality through the stories we tell ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when I gave the commencement address at UNCW, that was one of the themes I tried to hit. Right, is that it's impossible to tell if something that is happening to you is really good or bad in the moment. Mm-hmm. But you're going to experience it consistent with the story you tell yourself about it.
That's right.
You know, and we are meaning making machines.
Yes.
That's what humans do, right? And it is amazing, you know, to see, to hear what somebody puts together for the meaning of a certain thing, and you're looking at it and saying, "There was nothing like that."
That's
right?
That's
you know, and then the third person is like, well, neither one. I mean, I don't know what they were looking at. That's something totally, you know, and on it goes, because the amount of information that's there in our awareness is so vast that we can only attend to certain portions of it. So we got to be careful with the stories we tell ourselves.
That's right. And when it comes to meaning, if you ask the person, so tell me, what do you mean by that? Oftentimes they can't even give you the meaning of it, right? Because they don't know. They haven't really thought about it. I remember we had a guest on and I asked her, so tell me, what is the meaning of being a human being? She said, that's a philosophical question. Yeah, it may be, but what does it mean to say that I'm human? You know, we have to, because we say it all the time, I'm a human being, so but tell me, what does that mean? What does that encompass? And most people can't give you an answer because they haven't thought about it in that depth of what it really means to be human. And so that's why we have some of that, that's why we can't learn some of the lessons we need to learn around inclusion.
Plus, human language is woefully inadequate to describe the breadth of human feelings, right? And so feelings are a lot bigger than what we can possibly even describe if we had command of the entire language, which none of us do.
That's right.
And so we only have the pieces of it that we have, and so we come with these, you know, it's like stick figure versions of a painting when we try to talk about what we feel. It just can't quite get there.
No, we can never fulfill it all. We can't put the meat on the bones, right? Because we don't know. We can't express it. And I think I heard somewhere there are roughly about 2,000 words that we use in our language on a regular basis, right? Even though with all the different words that exist in the English language, only about 2,000 words that we actually use on a regular basis. And so that means the expansion of your vocabulary, and that gets back to learning. If you're someone who doesn't want to learn, guess what's going to happen? Your vocabulary is going to remain stagnant for the mere fact that you don't want to learn, probably because you don't understand what the return on the learning will be.
It is amazing that, you know, the ability to vividly describe something is so motivational for other people. That to me, that informs what it takes, because, you know, we are compelled to action not by words but by stories.
Yes.
It's the way they're put together, and even more powerful is if it's in person. Even more powerful is the body language, is all the in-between stuff that really it gets back to that conveying of feelings takes more than just the spoken or written word.
Yeah, that's right. And in some cultures, you don't share your feelings because you're, especially if you're a man, you're considered to be weak. So there's a label put on you, right? If you're a woman, oh, she's assertive or she's aggressive. And so the whole connotation around sharing, and so even though we talk about emotional intelligence, because that's what this really is, right? You don't do it simply because of some of the constructs that's been built around being weak and what it means to be strong, and so you can't share your feelings. But that's all a part of the learning process, right? That's how you get to know you better, and that's how others get to know you better as well.
Every stereotype is just a mental model, right?
That's all it is.
I mean, and so why would we want to constrain anything to that, right? So if you take a look around right now, in almost any sphere of our existence, things could potentially be better.
That's right.
Right? Like, folks are left behind in certain things. Folks are ahead in certain things. That's one thing that may have to do a lot with the models that they are telling themselves all along the way.
That's absolutely correct. And for me, as I gave my current reality and the new reality was provided, I'm going to say that I was in that space that you just described. And so I'm now seeing that space totally different. And so when I enter the room now, not that I didn't enter confidently before, because I think I've always been a pretty confident person, and I pretty much spoke what was on my mind. But that now me entering that room is a whole different being that's entering that room, utilizing different vocabulary as well.
Yeah, my alternate reality has to do with getting help. So, one of the things that, as an oldest child, as a surgeon, as a lot of the different roles that I've had, is to have answers, to be self-sufficient. A lot of us get raised by our parents to ultimately be self-sufficient. And there was a real paradox for me, because I've long known how good it makes me feel to help somebody, whether it's as a teacher, as a surgeon, as an executive leader of any kind, as a coach. I've long known that, right? Yet I never understood what that meant in terms of me asking for help, because I always felt like asking someone else for help was putting upon them in a way, right? Like it was making an unreasonable demand. But as I've explored this alternate reality, I realized that it actually is a mutual enrichment phenomenon, right? It's important to people that I need their help, just like it's important to me that they need my help. So it takes you back to that reciprocal relationship to allow your truth to be affected by the truth of another human. And it's really powerful. I mean, there's evidence for that everywhere.
It is. It's amazing, because I tell some of my clients, I said, I'm coaching you, but I'm learning from you at the same time. And not only am I learning from you, but I'm learning more about me. So it is a mutual gain there. Even though you may be the client, I'm learning just as much about me as I'm learning in helping you. And sometimes it's difficult to ask for help. It's become easier to say, hey, I need your help, because the bottom line is I don't know everything. I can't do everything. You're going to provide for me some insight and some perspective that I probably wouldn't have heard had I not asked for help. And, for people, for some people, it's not easy. But I've learned more and more that, hey, I need it. And our friend, of course, Marshall Goldsmith, he says, hey, it's okay to ask for help. I remember being in Phoenix a couple of years ago, and the CEO of what's the investment firm? Can't think of it at the time, but she was there, and she says, hey, she raised her hand. She said, I need help. I'm here because I'm getting ready to take over this organization, this financial institution, and I got thousands of employees, and I know I can't do it all by myself, so I'm here to get help. And, I was like, wow, I guess it's simple, but it's not easy, right?
Yeah, that's right. It comes back. I'm going to need help. I'm going to be needed, and I'm going to be changed.
That's right.
A lot of times I think what we see is that some of the calls for help that you hear now are almost counterfeit, right? Because people are saying they want help, but what's missing is that there's sometimes an unwillingness to accept the change that goes along with that help.
Yep.
And those things are not separable.
That's right.
Those three things have to go together if it's really going to work.
I've experienced that in trying to help some people around town, right? They asked me, I presented an idea. They said, hey, man, you put it together, we'll be there. And it really wasn't about helping me because I'm going to facilitate the process. And they weren't committed. And so that's a whole different ball game.
Yep. Well, I think we've about done it here for the hour. It's been great. I think if we've landed on one theme for our audience, it's that, the return on learning is all about self-work, similar to another episode we've had, that learning is about learning first about ourselves and how we can deconstruct some models that aren't serving us very well. If you want to catch up with us more, find us at unlikelyintersection.com or find us on our YouTube channel, Unlikely Intersections. You can find me on LinkedIn, Doc Philip Brown, or also our website, docphilipbrown.com. And Terry?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Terry Jackson, PhD. You can find me on Facebook. And please like, comment, and share all of our episodes that you like. And if you need, I guess, a dynamic duo to come out and speak at your organization, please feel free to contact us as well.
We'll see you at the next intersection.